visible to the parents, but they're offering prayers to Mother Devaki and her womb on how the controller of everything is just right now resting in the womb. And so we'll be reading those prayers right now.
O Lord, see upon this earth and in the heavenly
activities. Therefore, your appearance of birth in this world has no other cause than your pleasure potency. Similarly, the living entities who are part of you have no cause for miseries like birth, death, and old age, except when these living entities are conducted by your external energy.
O Supreme Controller, your Lordship previously accepted incarnations as a field, as a horse, a tortoise, Narasimhadeva, a boar, a swan, Lord Ramachandra, Parshuram, and among the demigods, Vamanadeva, to protect the entire world by your mercy. Now, please protect us again by your mercy by diminishing the disturbances in this world. O Krishna, best of the Yadus, we respectfully offer our obeisances unto you.
O Mother Devaki, by your good fortune and ours, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself, with all His plenary of portions, such as Baladeva, is now within your womb. Therefore, you need not fear Kamsa, who has decided to be killed by the Lord. Your eternal son, Krishna, will be the protector of your entire Yadu dynasty.
After thus offering prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, the transcendence, all the demigods with Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva before them return to their homes in the heavenly tenants.
Hare Krishna. That also ends the chapter 2. We'll be focusing on verse 39. And the next chapter, the third one, is just beautiful, where Lord gives darshan to the divine parents in the form of Lord Sri Hari Vishnu. So we'll be reading that here onwards. We'll be reading verse 39 together. Please excuse my pronunciation. Na te abhavyesha bhavasya karanam vina vinodam batatarkayamahe bhavo nirodha stitirapya vidyaya Krita yatastvai abhaya shrayatmani. Nate bhavasyesha bhavasya karanam vina vinodam batatarkayamahe bhavo nirodha stitirapya vidyaya krita yatastvai abhaya shrayatmani. Nate bhavashesha bhavasya karanam Vina vinodam batatarkayamahe
Bhavo niratto stitirapya vidyaya
Bhavo nirodha stitirapya vidyaya Krita yatastvai abhaya shrayatmani.
Nate bhavyasya bhavasya karanam
Nate bhavasyesha bhavasya karanam Vina vinodam batatarkayamahe
Bhavo nirodha stitirapya vidyaya
Bhavo nirodha stitirapya vidyaya Krita yatastvai abhaya shrayatmani. Nate bhavasyesha bhavasya karanam Vina vinodam batatarkayamahe Bhavo nirodha sthitiyapya vidyaya. It's okay, try it. Krita yathastvai abhayashrayatmani. Nate bhavasya bhavasya karanam. Na vinodam bhatatarkayamahe. Bhavo nirodha sthitiyapya vidyaya. Krita yathastvai abhayashrayatmani. Work together. Not they of your lordship, Abhavasya, of whom there is no birth, death, or maintenance, is for an ordinary being, Isha, O Supreme Lord, Bhavasya, of your appearance, your birth, Karana, the cause, Vina, without, Vinodam, the pastime. Despite what is said, you are not forced to come to this world by any cause. Bhata, however, Tarkayamahe, we cannot argue, but must simply understand that these are your pastimes. Bhava, birth, nirodha, death, sthiti, maintenance, api, also, avidyaya, by the external illusory energy, krita, done, yatha, because, twai, unto you, abhayashraya, or fearless shelter of all, atmani, of the ordinary living entity. Read the translation together. The Supreme Lord, you're not an ordinary living entity appearing in this material world as a result of fruitive activities. Therefore, your appearance or birth in this world has no other cause than your pleasure potency. Similarly, the living entities who are part of you have no cause for miseries like birth, death, and old age, except when these living entities are conducted by your external energy. Part what? By A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am the least prepared, but there's so much in this purport which is just full of nectar. So we'll try to see how we can focus on it together. Anyone wants to read? Maybe I'll read it. No, I'm kidding. Yes.
As stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.7, Mamaya Vamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. The living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and thus they are qualitatively one with the Lord. We can understand that when the Supreme Lord appears or disappears as an incarnation, there is no other cause than His pleasure potency. We cannot force the Supreme Personality of Godhead to appear. As He says in Bhagavad Gita 4.7,
Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadadmanam srijanyam. Thank you, Prabhu. One from this side.
Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendants, when there is a need to diminish a burden created by the demons, the Supreme Godhead can do it in many ways because He has multifarious energies. There is no need for Him to come as an incarnation, since He is not forced to do anything like ordinary living entities. The living entities come to this material world in the spirit of enjoyment, but because they want to enjoy without Krishna, Krishna Bahir Mukha Haya Bhoja Vanchakari, they suffer birth, death, old age, and disease under the control of the illusory energy. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears, however, no such causes are involved. His descent is an act of His pleasure potency. We should always remember this distinction between the Lord and the ordinary living entities, and not uselessly argue that the Lord cannot come. There are philosophers who do not believe in the Lord's incarnation and who ask, why should the Supreme Lord come? But the answer is, why should He not come? Why should He be controlled by the desire of the living entity? The Lord is free to do whatever He likes. Therefore, this verse says, Vina Vinodam Patatarkayamahe. It is only for His pleasure that He comes, although He does not need to come.
Thank you. The last paragraph is more like it summarizes everything perfectly, so I'll read it. It's one of the things very beautiful about Srila Prabhupada's purports is that you get some questions in your mind as you proceed, but you also get answers soon. Or if you don't, that's for an even better reason, because you later on discovered it through some miraculous ways. So it says, when the living entities come to this world for material enjoyment, they are entangled in karma and karma phala by the Lord's illusory energy. Now this is what we refer to as fruitive, because we use this word so many times. The word comes from fruit. And you see the word karma phala here? Because for you to get a fruit, you have to first do something, right? A fruit is a result of an action. If you don't see the seed, if you don't sow the seeds, if you don't take care of the plant, the fruits will not come. If no one plants the seed, the fruit will not come. So therefore, it's a result. There is a cause behind it. But Lord, His pastimes, it's outside the purview. It's above the purview of karma phala, of fruitive activities. It's just very important for us to realize that there is no cause behind it. There is no cause behind the Lord. And that's where often the atheists, thank you so much, the atheists and people who struggle to comprehend this, they often get confused, is because how can there ever be a result without a cause? But there is something like that. And you can experience it even. Thank you, it's not needed. Thank you.
Hare.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, I forgot, thank you. No. Even in mundane life, the highest emotions that you've experienced towards people around you, feelings of gratitude, love and whatnot, even you'd struggle to find the reason behind it sometimes. It's just happening. So when we're talking about something totally transcendental, how can you even think of a cause behind it? Okay. But if one seeks shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, one is again situated in his original liberated state. As stated here, Kritha yathastvai abhayashrayatmani. One who seeks shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord is always fearless. Because we're dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we should give up the idea that without Krishna, we can enjoy freedom in this material world. This idea is the reason we have become entangled. Now it is our duty, important, to seek shelter again at the Lord's lotus feet. It's not an option, it's a duty. This shelter is described as abhaya, or fearless. Since Krishna is not subject to birth, death, old age or disease, and since we are not part and parcel of Krishna, we also are not subject to birth, death, old age and disease. But we have become subject to these illusory problems because of our forgetfulness of Krishna and our position as His eternal servants. Jivara Swarupa Hoy Krishna Nityadas. Therefore, if we practice devotional service by always thinking of the Lord, always glorifying Him and always chanting about Him, as described in text 37, Shriman Granan Samsmarayam Chintayan, we will be reinstated in our original constitutional position and thus be saved. The demigods therefore encourage Devaki not to fear about Kamsa, but to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was already within her womb. It's just brilliant. Now, there are a few things that I'd like for us to especially talk about. And we read over here that Lord need not come Himself to take care of the spread of demoniac activities that happen on this realm. Can we think of some examples where He Himself didn't come but He sent His multifarious energies, as Prabhupada is mentioning here? You can think of one, Amla, I'm sure. Not exactly. So Lord's energy, external energy, also called Devi Mahamaya, came in the form of personified as goddess Durga, and she came to slay Mahishasura demon, Mahishasura Mardini. Right? So he need not himself always come to slay the forces which are creating disturbances, and yet he comes, and that is purely out of his pleasure potency, and that is what I want us to focus next. This is two words, pleasure potency, but just full of so many things, because we have so much of this desire to experience pleasure, right? And that's there all the time. Where does this desire come from? And Srila Prabhupada has mentioned that everything that we have ultimately comes from Krishna. He's wholesome, we're parts of Him. He has tendencies to engage in pleasure, and therefore we have. The only problem is that the way we're trying to do it is just not even practical. We can't do it the way we're trying to approach pleasure. And we'll just look at it how. The root of pleasure seeking that we have in us is, if you look at it, observe closely, is actually just the desire process. right? You desire for something. You want to get a pleasure out of something or someone. And that's where the problem lies. Because if you want to eliminate this desire, that itself is a desire. Right? I don't want to have a desire is a desire. So you go into a loop of never-ending process. And that's where Munis and meditative people and impersonalists, they follow a certain path where they try to eliminate the desire. Then ultimately they give up and then they surrender to something or someone. Most times they don't know what. And they land up at a temple. Yeah. So Prabhupada has mentioned a few times in this purport that we also have the same quality a Lord has. Sadchid Ananda. Right? And therefore we also have this pleasure-seeking desire in us. And that's okay. So every time these desires do come up in you, it's not that you have to rebuke yourself. Just remind yourself that ultimately your quality is the same as the Lord Himself. But it's just that how you're trying to fulfill it or trying to find expression to that desire is just funny. So if you laugh at yourself, it might even help you. Right? You need not fight with it also always. So how does the Lord enjoy pleasure? Let's look at it. And then we can contrast it how we do. Now Prabhupada here mentions by His pleasure potency, which is also described in the traditional language as Hladini Shakti, right? Personified, represented by Srimati Radharani, of course. Now if we try to imitate Him and try to kill demons, which we can't, or try to imitate His pastimes, where He's engaging with His pleasure potency, it won't help us. But if you look at His pleasure potency, what is she doing always? Serving Him. Srimati Radharani is always engaged in Krishna's service, always trying to remember Him every moment. She never forgets Him for a moment, and He never forgets her as a result. So we have to follow that. The way that Krishna is enjoying pleasure is through His pleasure potency, and the pleasure potency is always in His service and remembering Him. So if we are trying to enjoy pleasure all the time, and yes we are, then we have to do the same. Serve Him every moment and remember Him. And therefore, in that line, we're not doing anything different from Him also. Because you see, it's very subtle, it's very hard to grasp. It's very subtle. Because if He's experiencing pleasure out of His pleasure potency serving Him, then for us to experience pleasure is also through serving Him. Because then we become a part of His pleasure potency. And that's all we have to do. Okay. But another key thing over here is why we get stuck in these loops of our five senses and we try to enjoy pleasures through other ways other than serving Him is because somewhere we've forgotten our core identity. And Prabhupada mentions it in this purport in the last paragraph, is that our eternal form is of Nitya Krishna Das, is forever servitude in His service. And how many times do we forget it? All the time. All the time. And that's why we're here. And we focus on chanting rounds, doing kirtan, going out, this and that. But how many times a day do we remind ourselves of our eternal identity? Once a day? No, sometimes 0 times a day. Never quite always. This is where it's very important to never forget reminding ourselves of our identity. Now we've forgotten it and that's okay. The whole point of all these chants and these rounds and this service is to serve Krishna, but is to also simultaneously awaken our true identity within ourselves. Is to remind ourselves because we've forgotten. And if you consciously also try to remind yourself, that itself will aid the process. But can you? Is the question. Because if you're under the spell of Maya, and if you remind yourselves of your eternal identity, then you've technically won over Maya, which is as powerful as Krishna. So you've won over Krishna. So can you remind yourself of your eternal identity? Well, technically you can't, it appears like. And that's where it's beautiful. It happens just through mercy and Krishna's desire. But it appears like we're doing it ourselves. So should I do it, or will Krishna do for me so I don't have to do any sadhana? It's a natural question that comes. If this question is coming to you, then mercy part is already addressed. Okay, I won't do any sadhana, the mercy will handle it for me, the grace will handle it for me. It's not correct, because if this thought is coming to your head, this question is coming to your head, then grace has done its job. Mercy has done its job, now you have to do your job, is to do sadhana, is to serve. Because as much as you'd like to think, just with your desire and will, just this thought cannot enter your head. That how do you remind yourself of your eternal identity? Because you're lost anyway. How can someone who's lost just automatically find themselves? They have to discover a way. And the way comes through sadhana and through mercy ultimately. So what I'm trying to say is just very subtle. It's very hard to describe in words. But reminding yourself of your eternal identity is just so important. And when you'll do that, you'll somewhere realize that where did the thought even come to my head? It wasn't just me. Because if I knew it, then my eternal identity is to be Krishna's devotee and servitude, then I wouldn't be lost in my pleasure-seeking activities in the first place. But I was. And yet this thought came to my head. So now you're living in this beautiful temple. Shri Radha Kshetra Gopinath ki jai. And you're having his uchishta, his prasadam, rather a more appropriate word, every meal. So mercy is very much descendant on you. And if you're watching this video online also, and then also you came across such a video because of mercy and grace. So now it's just your responsibility to offer services. And it's not very serious and a job to serve, trust me. It's a very pleasurable activity by itself. Another point that is mentioned in this purport, and everything is just so related, at the end perhaps you'll discover how everything's just fitting well together, is fear. So if we focus on the last paragraph, Srila Prabhupada says, now it is our duty to seek shelter again at Lord's lotus feet. This shelter is described as abhaya or fearless. Now we seek pleasure because there is a tendency for us to seek pleasure, naturally, the quality that Krishna has. In very little proportions, tiny proportions are also in us, the qualities at least, not quantity. But then, fear is not Lord's quality. That's what we're making it up. Right? And that's the job of Maya and our own ignorance. And you'll notice that the tendency to seek pleasure in material world is coming out of fear also. When have you felt fearless? And you've been like, or you've not felt insecure about something. You know, if you're insecure about something, you'll definitely go for pleasure seeking in one way or another. You'll definitely go for material sense enjoyment. Just notice this. When you're experiencing a certain bliss in kirtan or chanting, or you're feeling a certain connection with the Lord or with His devotees, are you ever fearful in such a state? Maybe you're attentive because you don't want to offend anyone. And that's awesome. That's a sign of love. But then you're not fearful. Fear is about what will happen to me. It's a certain sense of self-centeredness. Fear is also a root of pleasure-seeking ability, but in the material world, not in the transcendental abode. So what do you do with this fear problem? I don't know. I'm afraid myself that this class will go wrong. Because I'm afraid of my own image in front of my friends. Right? And if someone will glorify me because I did something good, I'm engaging in pleasures through material means. Praises from devotees is still transcendental, but it's a good idea to just be a little hard on yourself, thinking that yes, praises even from them, at least my desire to experience praises is coming out of the desire to experience material pleasure. So if I don't have any fear about how this class will go, a fear about myself, not about the class itself, like how will people see me, I won't be concerned about seeking this pleasure through everyone's praises. And then I'll just offer my best into the services. And then I'll enjoy the real pleasure by being a little parcel of the Ladini, Shakti herself, by engaging in services to Krishna. Oh boy. So you see, your fear is somewhat connected to this ability to seek pleasure in the material world. And for you to be able to get over this fear is somewhere lies the answer. But how can you do that? We're fearful because we're concerned about ourselves and our image and what will happen to us. So again, it ties to our identity. Because we're concerned about this body, this material body, and this mind that we've developed, and this so-called form that we have, and now we're afraid about what will happen to it. So somewhere we're misidentified with it. Again, identity comes into the picture. Fear, identity, pleasure, everything's just so connected. So reminding ourselves about our core identity is just very important. I want you all to please keep it in your schedule if you must. Who am I really and why am I doing this? Just keep on going back to that core identity. Will definitely help you to get over the fear. Because if I am a part of Krishna, and if I have the same qualities as him, as Satchidananda, then what do I have to be afraid of? And if he is my Lord and he's all-powerful, he's taking care of my situations whatsoever, even though I may not see it immediately, then what do I have to be afraid of? What is the point of this fear? And if I'm not fearful about anything, then I'm not actively looking out for fulfilling desires in this material domain, then there's no desire seeking happening in material worlds. And then comes this moment of silence. Okay, what am I supposed to do? And then you look at Krishna and he's like, I'm here. So you'll know what to do. It's not that difficult. So yeah, these are some of the points that I wanted to reflect upon. Please forgive me if I went outside the line. But yes, that's what I want to talk about. If anyone has anything to add to it?
Very nice.
Okay.
I have a question. You said fear is not Krishna's identity.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we say everything comes from Krishna.
Yes.
Like even if you steal something, that is
Yes.
also Krishna has that steal thing.
Yes.
If you can explain it, or if someone else.
Oh, maybe someone else can explain. But I want to answer it anyway. So, Krishna does not need to fear because he's all powerful, right? But fear is a part of his Leela also. If you look at it, because when Krishna comes as himself, and my friend Monal here, he was sharing a pastime the other day when Krishna's on Putana, trying to, and she's a demoness who's trying to kill him. But he's acting all scared because Putana grows herself, expands herself in size, and Krishna's up here and he's looking down, he's like, whoa, I'll fall down. And he's fearful, but he's not really fearful. That's for the purpose of his play. Now, so he has the ability to experience everything, including fear, but that's not a part of his core quality. Sad Chid Ananda, none of it's fear, right? And when, even if you look at yourself, those moments of happiness where you've genuinely felt happy and liberated in a sense of just genuine appreciation in this moment, have you felt fearful? Not really. So when we are in bliss, we don't quite feel fearful. We create it because we don't go back to our root identity. That's where the concept of willpower, the sense of individual will also comes in. Because Krishna doesn't interfere with our will, being our lover. Therefore, out of our will we generate fear because we choose to be self-conscious. All under the influence of ignorance, but yet it is a choice. And we have to recognize it, otherwise you can't choose the other way. You can't choose the opposite of that, right? In fact, you bring this into my head now, and quite forcefully, so let me spit it out. Is like even in this mundane world, if we do tend to care about someone, our family members, people who we care about, we don't so much try to enforce our will on them. We try our best to make them aware of the situation, right? And sometimes if we want to even enjoy their companionship, we try to impress them. We dress up really nicely, we pass from in front of them, try to gain their attention. But if we have to ask for someone for attention or for company, it always feels insulting to your own emotions. And we don't even love people really here. In Krishna, he loves us actually. And for him to enforce his will on us, for him to be dragged to him, he will never do that. Because that's the quality of a real lover. You never enforce your will, right? So our fear can go away too, but we create it because we choose to not go to him, to not identify with him, to not be directed to him, to not be conscious of him, to not be Krishna conscious. So we generate the fear out of our own self-centeredness, and that's how it works. So that's, I don't know if I even answered your questions, but
Can I add something?
yes, please.
That's very nice explanation. Please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that what the fear Vishesh is talking about is a healthy fear. Okay, so feelings like fear, guilt, even pride. So there is a spiritual side to it, and then there's a material side to it. The perverted reflection, right? So, for example,
like if you have there should be fear. There is a healthy and unhealthy fear. Fear of losing devotees association. Fear of what if I, what if I did not take the advantage of dham, what if I offended someone? What if my Lord gets upset with me? What if my Guru gets upset with me? That's a healthy fear. Well, I think, am I correct? What the
Yes.
fear you were talking about was, Vishesh was talking about is unhealthy fear.
Yes.
That, how will my class go, which is just subjected to conditioning, like that. So both exist, and healthy fear is very important. But healthy fear never threatens you,
Not really.
It never threatens you. And unhealthy fear, it brings all sorts of problems. Then you become, when you're fearful, then you become defensive. And to become defensive, you may come to crime, you may be angry. Or, like this, all in earth has, they just start dancing in a circle.
Yes.
Like Gaga.
Thank you.
So,
So if you look at it, what if I offend someone? What if I cause suffering to someone or misery to someone, and I'm fearful about that? That is what is healthy fear, right? But that is not coming from a place of self-centeredness. It's coming from the other person, from fellow devotees, right? You don't want to offend Krishna when you're doing his services also. That is healthy fear. And the experience of it is not the same as the fear when we want to save our own self-image, when we're self-centered. So two different sorts of. We can use the same word fear for it because they feel pretty similar, but yeah.
I was just reflecting on the words that everybody said. Like, in Nectar of Devotion, they've explained fear as also a rasa. Like, there is a pleasure that comes in fear. So in Damodar pastime, when Krishna was like being chased by Mother Yashoda, so he told Yogamaya, so there's a question that comes like, is he actually fearful? Like, because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is he actually fearful of Mother Yashoda? And the answer given is yes. Because he told Yogamaya to cover everything. Even in that moment, he forgets his own identity. And so he lets fear he let himself be fearful. So it's kind of like a pleasure for him. And then when Mother Yashoda was running after him with a stick, when she saw fear on his face and in his eyes, she became fearful that, my son is feeling fearful. So then she took that fear, she dropped the stick. So like you were saying, like being fearful of how other person is feeling if you offended them or if you've hurt them. It's not coming from self-centeredness. And here Yashoda Mother was fearful that, how is Krishna feeling in that moment?
Yes. So healthy fear is what we can call it. But we have to figure out some English word for it. So we use the same word fear.
I have some questions and a reflection too. This is little, Krishna has his own way of humbling. Yes, it's so interesting how this fear topic showed up today. Yesterday was in a walk, and I was reflecting, am I envious? Am I angry? Am I this? Am I that? And then one of the topics that is very important for me is fear came up. That am I fearful? And I was like, no, I'm very fearless. Can I do this? Yes, I can do this. Can I do that? Yes, I can do that. So I was very happy, that I'll do this. And just this morning when I arrived at the temple, there was a big skunk right outside the middle door.
Oh no.
And that's when my fear, I got out of the car and then just jumped back into the car. And Anisha and everyone thought, what happened? Like, did you see a snake or something? I said, no, I can't go to the temple. Because I got sprayed one time and that was the most ridiculous experience.
Sorry about
But
that.
that fear was there. And then I just remembered I am fearful. I still have fear within my heart. I'm not as bold as I thought. But it's interesting how Krishna, shows these things. And what you were still, if we start conquering a fear with Krishna, it is the most liberating. We may have hundreds of anarthas. One may feel if I conquered my anger, I may feel this. But I think fear is the most liberating feeling because then there is no anxiety, then there is no worry, then there is no, greed also. And Krishna's promise in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, I think 32 verse, my devotee never perishes. So there's nothing to fear, absolutely. Then just a couple of questions. Maybe I'll start with one and see if anyone else has. We were very nicely describing about being servant. I think I just wanted you to maybe elaborate a little bit that being servant is not as fancy. Like I'm sure like no one takes birth to say like I want to be a doctor, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a servant. So how does serving Krishna is so is beyond and is the most blissful thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because we may feel like we're not serving, but we are always servants of something or another or someone, right? There are, come on, you have certain people that you care about and they don't reply to your text for a few hours. And who are you serving in that moment, right? And you just become scared all the time. So Maya, which is the external material world that we're living in, you're serving it all the time. Right? So you could be serving that or you could be serving Krishna. There's no choice out of serving someone or something. If not Maya or Krishna, you're at least serving yourself, being self-centered, but that is also in a way serving Maya because you're serving in an illusion state, which is a quality of Maya. That somehow this service will provide you satisfaction. So yes, to get to your question, is that it sounds like I don't want to be a servant of someone. Why should I be that lowly and humble and whatnot? But well, you are serving one thing or another all the time. It's better you serve. Okay, but if you do, and when you do believe like you fall in love with someone, it's not really true, sorry to break that for you, but are you not ready to serve them? Oh, I want that. Okay, I'll drive my car for those many kilometers and get you that. Oh yes, you are very willing to serve. Because you think the pleasure will come from that. But what we're saying is that there is an actual source of pleasure also. Right? And serving that source genuinely gives you the pleasure or the bliss that you're seeking. And that's where we're mentioning what being Krishna's servant or the Lord's servant or God's servant, how you want to relate.
Very beautiful.
Yes.
I have one reflection and one question. I really like the point where you said that you have to recognize, otherwise how will you understand the other aspect, which was very nice. And
Okay.
You mentioned that if you're insecure, you will definitely go for pleasure-seeking activities. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, you can look back at your life. Whenever you've gone for some kind of a pleasure-seeking activity, which is material in nature, you've gone for an intoxicant, or even gone to for some movie, that can't quite come out of a moment of just bliss. There's something that you're worried about at the back of your head. It could be your examinations, your so-called romantic lives. It could be your job situation. It could be something, right? And you have to distract yourself in something, and that's where that tendency comes from. So out of that insecurity, what will happen to me? What will turn out? You just go into the direction of pleasure seeking. But it doesn't really help. It's only a distraction for a while. I think, so what were you asking at the end of it?
I just asked you to elaborate, like maybe share more points on it.
I mean, there's, I don't have
saw
any.
yesterday, we were at traffic and there was like a very nice, high professional person in a suit. And he came out and was yelling at someone on the phone. Clearly, you could clearly tell this guy was really stressed out. And he started smoking. So I guess this explains that, you go when you're insecure. It did look like he was insecure, he was fearful, and then he just went to gratify his senses.
Yes.
To escape through that cigarette.
Absolutely. And, again, forgot. But what I'm trying to say is that it's, the core of it is identity. Because even when you got scared from the skunk, and which is understandable, I'm not saying that hug the skunk. But what I'm saying is, why? Because we think we are this body. Because we are so in our experience most times, because we are under the illusion most times, right? But if the core identity will awaken with us, and it will one day, and we're running away from it. Because we think there's pleasure here, that's why we're running away from our core identity. When it does arises, our core identity, then there are exalted devotees. We hear stories, and then there are so many living in this day and age also that I don't know personally, but there should be, that if they're walking by and someone hits them, they don't care because they're involved in some kind of a bliss within themselves. right? They're experiencing that nectar. And does that not happen to you? If you're in certain kind of a pleasure, or pleasure is the wrong word, but some kind of a bliss after a kirtan, and even if someone sort of minorly offends you or says something mean to you, you're like, oh, that's okay, or I'll just forgive them, right? So it's there. Because in that moment, at the very core of you, you are in touch with your core identity. That is, you belong to Krishna, that you are a part of Krishna, that somewhere you are related with him, right? So whenever we'll be in the touch with the core of our actual identity, I wouldn't say real identity, because it's identity only if it's real, right? If it's false, then it's not really your identity. So that's where, again, it comes back to, you have to keep reminding yourself of your core identity. Otherwise, there's no question getting over fear, the bad fear, the material fear, and this getting over this tendency to seek pleasure out of the material world, unless you awaken yourselves to your core identity through sadhana, through mercy. And because mercy is there, so you have the ability to remind yourself all the time also. Yes, Prabhuji.
I had one reflection, two questions. The reflection was like, this class was very beautifully centered towards the theme that Jivara Swarupa Krishna Upadesh, that we are the eternal servants of Krishna. And if you look at like our initiation process as well, the name we get is like, the Das and Dasis.
Yes.
So if we are getting like Jivadvaya, I'm not a Jivadvaya, I'm the servant of the Jivadvaya. Who is Jivadvaya? Nityananda. Who is Nityananda? The eternal associate of Krishna. So technically we are supposed to serve Krishna. And you reminded us very beautifully. Thank you for that. And in your class you mentioned fear is also a way of seeking pleasure. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
We've spoken about it in a few different ways, but sure. Fear guides you towards seeking pleasure materially. Because fear is the material fear, or rather just call it concern about yourself. Because what is fear? What will happen to me? That is fear ultimately, right, in simple words. So this sense of what will happen to me comes out of this identity that we've developed, is that I am this body and mind and these material emotions that I experience, right? So there is a lot of fear in that identity itself, and therefore to distract ourselves, to strengthen that identity further, to forget about that fear or that concern about what about me, we go for material, for engagement into sense. In fact, I can also break it to you technically, but most of you will fall asleep. How do you experience pleasure in material world? Is through your five senses. And there are subtle senses also, like false ego and intelligence. That's a different matter. But essentially through five senses, right? So there is, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in one of the purports we discussed in Bhakti Shastri class also, there are layers to our material world. Like there's a food body, then there's a mental body. There's pranamaya kosha, annamaya kosha, stuff like that. Very technical. But there is a manomaya kosha, which is our mind level. It's just made up of sensations. It's pure sensations. Sensations. Through senses, five senses, we experience different sensations. And there's a tendency to keep doing that, And in the material world, the topmost sensation that we experience is and it's even mentioned in scriptures in multiple places, the act of sexuality. And that's why it's the deepest binding factor here also. Right? Because you experience just so much sensations through your five senses. But if you look at it, you're going for so much of that sensory experience is because, what about me? That fear is right there. Because you haven't tasted the transcendental, sensation is not the word, but the transcendental experience. Or at least you have not tasted it enough. Right? So as we continue to progress in our sadhana and remind ourselves, it's very important, I keep saying it again and again, it can't happen by your will. But if this thought is coming to your head, and if you're in this class, then it is by mercy. It happens by mercy ultimately. Is that remind ourselves of our core identity as we awaken that core identity within us through Krishna's will and desire and mercy and devotees. Then this what about me will also vanish. Then this desire to seek pleasure out of the sensory body that we have will also vanish. And it happens when devotees go into bhava samadhis, when they go into nitya leelas. We're talking about two higher things right now, okay? I can't even talk about all that. When devotees, they do go into that. Our Namachara Shrihadas Thakur is just chanting all the time. Do you think he's just thinking and just listening to the sounds? They enter into nitya leela, right? What are they in the leela? They enter into that. So in that moment, and in those experience of their leelas that they're a part of, they're not experiencing that sensory body which is experiencing through 5 senses. That is a transcendental experience. What is the word transcendental? Above, transcend, This is my laptop, now my hand is transcendental to the laptop. Not actually, because it's in the same physical world, but so to speak, so to understand, right? So when you go deep into when you realize your core identity, true core identity, then you will be above the platform of the 5 senses. So fear will also vanish. Now, if you'll have to come down and operate again, if you'll forget yourself, which I have, then again fear will come, pleasure seeking will come. So it's just such a game. And when you realize and you're like, what? And then surrender comes. So ultimately it's surrender, awakening your core identity. But we have to play that game because you want to play that game. You can't just give up what to do. Yes, Prabhuji.
So what I understand is like, what we are fearing is like fear of being left out, and fear of like, what if we don't enjoy this?
Fear about what about me?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what feels like. Fear is also a pleasure seeking way. So like
100%.
Okay.
100%. So because we're operating so much in a thinking mind, we have to create models in it, fear, pleasure seeking, identity, this. But there's a tiny tendency in us to just be like this and make it about ourselves, but not out there about Krishna. And that's the core of, you can't describe it in words. You just feel in deeper states of japa and sadhana. So it's just, we're trying to work through all these models. Is anyone?
I had a shocking question there.
I have a reflection to share. You said when we start to serve Krishna, we become part of pleasure potency. That is like joining Radharani's scheme. So I want to join Radharani's scheme.
I can be serving to Vishnu. I'm there.
Yes, and I heard a lecture, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, and I keep sharing this with you all the time, and you keep forgetting, and he says, this was Radha Ashtami lecture, is that the only object of love there is Krishna. You can't really love anyone else. It's like, I can see this device, it's an object of sight for me, I can see this. But the only object of love is Krishna, that means you can't really love anything or anyone else. Now, but whatever love that is there all the times, it's like a wave of the ocean of love that is Radharani. So she's the whole reservoir of love, always directed towards Krishna. And he's the only object of love, always inviting love towards him, playing his flute, inviting Srimati Radharani. So if you even experience a moment of genuine love, which is impossible, and yet you do by mercy, for your dog even, in that moment, that love is directed towards Krishna, and it's a little tiny part of the love for Radharani. So you will ultimately come to Krishna. And this is, if it's not scripturally verified, then I apologize in advance. But I also heard related in Radhanath Maharaj's lecture. So just to add to your point, so if we're serving Krishna, we're part of that pleasure potency. If we're loving Krishna, we're part of the loving potency that Radharani is, always directed towards Krishna. Thank you for sharing that again. Yes, Prabhu.
You actually, I see that Monial Jiva, myself, we picked up few statements, whatever you said. So I think whatever you said was really powerful, and one of the things that you said was really nice. You said being attentive is a sign of love.
Yes.
And that's a reminder to chant. And that's really true. And if someone is talking to you and you just like look everywhere you don't feel love.
Yeah.
And then I guess just one question is that you also spoke about mercy. So what you were saying, your class is very nicely structured about serving Krishna, mercy and fear. And my question is that when do we become unqualified for mercy? This is a test for everyone. I have repeated this so many times.
See, I pray to Krishna all the time that please don't take my test because I will fail for sure. Right? When do we become disqualified?
Unqualified for mercy. Like when does the mercy start flowing? Mercy flows like miracle, but when does mercy start flowing in a devotee's life?
Okay, I'll try to answer that or give my perspective on it. But I'll again mention identity first, because when we forget it and when we think that we're this material body, is then we try to go so much into what about me, what about me. And from them stems this ability to make everything about you, and then you make offenses towards devotees, towards living entities, which are as dear to Krishna as me and every other devotee. And through those offenses, through you hurting people, you become disqualified for mercy. But why? Because you're doing that in a state of ignorance. Your very act, which is to hurt someone else or to offend someone else, is happening because you're wrongly identified right now, because you are under the spell of ignorance, because you don't know who you are. So naturally you're disqualified for mercy, because mercy, grace, all these things are only there in the transcendental platform. It is in your core identity platform, and now you're away from your core identity into an illusory identity. So you're away from mercy also naturally, so you become disqualified. But for practical purposes, yes, you offend someone, you become disqualified. If anyone has to answer.
Adding to it, like Krishna says, like devotees are in his heart, and in devotees has Krishna's heart. So if you are technically offending devotees, you are offending Krishna.
Yeah.
And the mercy stops.
Yeah. And if it's a non-devotee also, or even an object, if I have to push a chair like bam, like why? Because first of all, it's not gentle man, woman, like it's just not aesthetic. And also, even if it's a non-living entity or an immaterial entity, still part of Maya in a way, and that's Krishna's external energy. So just out of respect for your Krishna, out of love for your Krishna, you don't want to disturb or handle harshly any part of him also. That's just important, right? So it's fine, that chair is immaterial, but for you it should be a part of Krishna's energy, at least if not a part of Krishna.
So that means water is also part of energies, Krishna's energy, and we shouldn't waste water.
Yeah.
Did I do something?
No, he's telling everyone.
Oh, see.
I had one more question. We see like, sorry, should I ask it afterwards?
No, just last question.
So, serving Krishna is our internal position, and that's the ultimate way of seeking pleasure. But we also experience that bliss through chanting, through kirtan and whatnot. But we stop doing that activity at some point and engage in material world. So why do we stop doing that? Why can we not just always...
Okay, so essentially what you're asking is that if we do experience moments of bliss and ecstasy and whatnot and kirtan and through connection with Krishna, why do we come out of it again and go back into the material attachments? Well, that is a very deep question. I can't. Do you want to?
Yeah, that happens also because of a conditioning. That happens because mercy stops flowing. And also it's, we've got the high taste, like, so when a newcomer comes to the temple, they experience the real bliss, Oh, I figured, I decoded, oh wow, this was a secret that, Krishna is supreme, I want, and all religion, all world are fighting, everyone is fighting. So they experience real, but the comparison is that it's like a tester, like when you go to any store, you get a tester, but now in order to buy the product, like you need to work hard and to have that product. So it's like that, and it's normal for everyone to feel that way. But as far as we can keep fighting that friction, that's normal. So the answer is the conditioning. The answer is not the flow of mercy, and actually the third answer is also self-love. Because when we love ourselves, we know that this is good for us, but I'll not do it because it's not giving me some stimulation. So naturally, if I know that japa is good for me, so I will chant my rounds because I love myself. And I know this is good for me, and I love myself, I love Krishna. But when we also don't have self-love, so that is also another problem. And the fourth thing is also, you have to see that we're in Kali Yuga operates with this external stimulation, like you scroll social media, Instagram for like 1 hour, and then you are a totally different person after that. And you read Bhagavatam for 1 hour, you're a totally different person after that. So these stimulations, the way they, all these tricks that they use to keep you attached to these apps, you keep scrolling, you keep getting the content, what you like, and you can't get rid of it. So all these things, like in combination, are like wonderful tools of Mahamaya to keep you away from Krishna. So Yogamaya brings you closer to Krishna, Mahamaya keeps you away. These are just few arrows of Mahamaya that she keeps shooting.
Yeah. And again, it's about a choice. Again, will. That you have to exercise your will because Krishna wants you to. So when you genuinely are done with, like, this material is not mine and I don't belong here, I don't see a reason why Krishna will be like, okay, come back. So we have that will in us still to not choose him. therefore we have to keep on reinforcing it. That is Krishna consciousness, to keep on reinforcing it moment to moment in every activity that we do. So thank you so much.